21st Century Radio is sponsored by Hieronimus and Company. This is Talk Radio 680 WCBM. It's time now for award-winning 21st Century Radio. Here's your host, Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
She's a worried out, walking down this same highway. I don't see nothing new, but I feel a lot of change, and I get the strangest feeling as I'm heading for the light.
Well, that's where we're all headed, towards the light. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. This is Dr. Bob Hieronimus. My executive producer and research assistant, Laura Corden. Our engineer is Kristen Hagrick. Thank you, Traveling Wilburys. Well, for nearly 4 years, my executive producer and I have been working on our new book, The Secret Life of Lady Liberty, and have interviewed dozens of scholars, and one of the very first things we learned from them was, at the Peace Summit Conference in 2009 in Vancouver, Canada, the Dalai Lama said, "The world will be saved by Western women." Now, this comment startled many people, but for many conscious and privileged Western women, it was a call to action. Now, many of you have asked about our upcoming show with Der Spiegel TV about the secrets of the Native Americans, the Freemasons, and the dollar bill, which will be a major first for us because, unlike the dozens of U.S. documentaries on which I have been interviewed for History, Discovery, National Geographic, Sci-Fi, Fox, BBC, etc., 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 the interviewers for Der Spiegel seem to understand the importance of the unusually or usually overlooked impact of the Native Americans on Euro-Americans. Representatives from the League of the Iroquois were invited to attend and advised the Continental Congress during their deliberations and taught Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, and many others the key ingredients for success. The Union of the Iroquois League had maintained a successful representative democracy for hundreds of years, and the colonists got their first inklings of independence by observing the societies around them. Europeans picked up a great deal from the indigenous people in addition to their government structure, agricultural science, medicine, and controlled burn techniques, for example. But the Europeans were unfortunately unable to grasp the fundamental truth of most matrilineal societies on the East Coast, the place of power and reverence given to women. Now, that prediction of the Dalai Lama in 2009 that the world will be saved by Western women has just been proven by how the shutdown of our government was brought to an end. Time magazine has an article by J. Newton Small called 11 Things You Don't Know About the Senate Sisterhood. In it, she says you can credit the tight bipartisan bonds that these women have formed for not only seeding the compromise that reopened the government, but the vast majority of the legislation passed this session. Senate Appropriations Committee, our friend Barbara Mikulski, who is the committee chair, pushed through a government funding bill in January that avoided both a government shutdown and a default on U.S. debt. Budget Committee Chair Patty Murray passed the first Democratic budget in 4 years. Environment and Public Works Committee Chair Barbara Boxer saw through a $105 billion transportation dollar, well, from 500, that's a lot of money, $105 billion there. And congratulations there, Debbie Stabenow, who got $955 billion, the $955 billion farm bill passed. And all 20 women banded together to see the Violence Against Women Act signed into law. Except for immigration reform, every major bill passed this session has been authored by a woman. Well, all I can say is hallelujah. The Dalai Lama was right on. Let's elect another 25 women to both the House and Senate in 2014 and put our nation and our planet back together again. Well, as we enter our 27th year of broadcasting, there is another topic we consider the most important, and that is UFOs and those who operate them, not only today, but in the past millenniums, which today are better known as Ancient Aliens. And rejoining us is the president of Prometheus Entertainment, who has produced the History Channel series, massively popular Ancient Aliens, into 5 series. This is the 5th series. Burns won his first of 2 Emmys in 2003 as executive producer for A&E Broadcasting, biography series that is, as well as the President's Book of Secrets and Civilization Lost. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio, Kevin.
Hey, hello, Dr. Bob. How are you?
My pitching arm's pretty good tonight. I got a good curveball. And now, joining us also for the very first time is Giorgio A. Tsoukalos. I hope I got that pronunciation right. The star and consulting producer of Ancient Aliens, the series 2010-2012, and publisher of Legendary Times magazine, the only ancient astronaut publication in the world. Giorgio is a real-life Indiana Jones, and he is changing the way the world thinks about the ancient astronaut theory. Thank you for joining us tonight, Giorgio.
Thank you for having me on. Great pleasure.
Giorgio, I have one question to ask you from a dear friend of ours, Ralston Finney in Owings Mills. She said, how do you make your hair stand up like that?
It must be the aliens.
The aliens have done it for you?
Yes, or the electric socket. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
It's all right. Okay. Well, right. Now, Kevin, what inspired you to create this TV show, Ancient Aliens?
Well, I've always been kind of an alternative thinker. I believe that the world has more questions than answers. And I think that the purpose of life is to investigate the answers, even though you may never come up with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In other words, I think that the questions keep us alive and keep us interesting.
They sure do.
And I was never satisfied. I mean, I grew up, I went to Catholic school, and, we had to memorize a catechism where every question had a rote answer. And I was never satisfied with the answers. So more recently, we were engaged by Lucasfilm. It's interesting. I had done a series of documentaries about the making of movies, and the folks up at Lucasfilm were very impressed with one that we did on, believe it or not, Cleopatra. Had nothing to do with anything other than they came to us and said, George would like you to tell everyone what he meant by the 6 Star Wars movies. Well, I said, you're kidding. I mean, that was a tremendous compliment. And I said, well, I would talk to him, right? And they said, well, no, he doesn't always know what he meant. He would like you to talk to a lot of other people and put together a documentary that would inform people as to what he meant. So we did a documentary for the History Channel called Star Wars: The Legacy Revealed. And it did phenomenally well, and it led to them coming to me when they did the latest Indiana Jones show. And they said, how would you do it? Because we don't want to do a making of. We want to do something on Indiana Jones, and we can't show clips from the upcoming movie. In fact, we can't even tell you what the script is. Well, all I had was the poster for the new movie, the Crystal Skulls movie, and the trailer. And I said, oh, I know what this movie is. It's about aliens, and it's Chariots of the Gods. It's Eric von Daniken, and I literally had nothing to go by except that I had seen the Sun Classic Picture documentary Chariots of the Gods when I was in high school back in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this whole doc, which was really, why do we dig? Why do archaeologists do what they do? And in my opinion, we're looking for God, meaning archaeologists are looking for proof of where we come from. We don't know. We are a species with collective amnesia, and we really, really don't know how old the planet is. We really don't know how old man is, and we don't know why man is sentient in the way that he is when other creatures on the planet aren't. In my opinion, evolution doesn't entirely explain it.
You're right.
So we did this documentary called Indiana Jones and the Ultimate Quest, and the Ultimate Quest was the knowledge, was looking for where we are and who we come from. And I wanted the American Eric von Daniken, and my producer found him in Giorgio. And Giorgio was a guest in that show. And the show did very well, but afterwards I met Giorgio. He came to my office, and his hair wasn't quite as big then. And we got together, and I said, I would love to do something based on Erich von Däniken. And he said, well, Erich is alive and living in Switzerland. And I was very excited to hear that because I had thought by now he had surely passed away. And the idea behind Ancient Aliens was to do a modern-day version of Chariots of the Gods, but one that would involve lots of other theories, not just Mr. von Däniken's, meaning it would be I would cast a wide net and bring in a lot of people who each in their own way, having been inspired by that book, had brought their own research to bear, and we would create a large tent and do a show which turned out to be Ancient Aliens. Now, originally it was only going to be a 2-hour special, and the network said that when they got permission to do the show, because there was an executive at History Channel who very much wanted to do the show with us, but he said that his boss told him that if it didn't do a rating, he was going to lose his job, he was largely kidding, but the pressure was on, and we did the original Ancient Alien show, which we thought, that's it. We did an updated version of Chariots of the Gods, and it will certainly be the last one because I didn't think they'd ever bring it back. Well, it did so well, and every time they ran it, it did the same numbers that it did during its premiere. And they came back to me and said, would you do 5 more 2-hour shows? And I said, well, nobody watches a 2-hour show every week. And they said, why, you don't want to do it? And I said, well, of course I'll do it. And we did. I posed 5 rhetorical questions. You know, who were they? Where did they come from? What did they leave behind? Where did they go? And will they return? And those were the 5 questions that we used for the basis of the 5 2-hour shows. And that did very well. And they've come back to me, and by the end of this spring, Dr. Bob, we will have done something like 85 hours.
Extraordinary. That is
on a series idea that no one thought could be more than a couple of hours.
Well, I don't think you probably ever imagined it would become such a popular series, right?
It is amazing, and the repeats of episodes do as well as the premiere of the episodes. I mean, and what has been fascinating, and I credit Giorgio and I credit the other, contributors, David Childress and Jason Martell, and of course we lost Philip Coppens, but there's many, many people who contribute to the show, but who bring all of their years of study and all of their various theories. And I have a tremendously talented team of producers and writers and researchers who also. And I have to say, the network. I don't mean to pander to the History Channel, but this was a very bold series for them to support. They knew they were going to get a lot of, snarking and derision over it. And I've talked with other networks, Discovery Channel, National Geographic Channel, who, they've actually challenged us and said, for example, why don't you have any debunkers on? Why don't you have any debunkers on the show? And they were surprised that the History Channel let us do the show without that. And I said, well, when we did the original 2-hour, we interviewed some. We tried it. And what happened is it was like, the dog, defecating on the rug during a party. I mean, it was, no one wanted to hear from them because they all had the same thing to say. Well, there's no proof. There's no proof. It's all conjecture. It's no proof. And my feeling is, well, there's no proof of God or Jesus or religion or anything else that billions of people around the world believe in. And if proof is the criteria, then most of us would have to admit we're not here. So whereas we were taking a very inclusive and I think very open-minded approach, the other criticism that I tend to be very sensitive about, and I was a history major. I mean, I come at this show, in many ways, I'm the voice of the narrator because it's all questions. I just am open-minded to the questions. We don't take a conclusion. A lot of critics who say that we're saying this about aliens, not about aliens, we're not. I invite other people to do that, but the editorial point of view of the show is to be open-minded. And But when people say, well, the show is colonialist, the show is condescending toward people of ancient worlds and third world races, because we claim that nothing could be built, no spectacular buildings, no pyramids could be built without aliens, I say, excuse me, it is those same ancient people who credit those buildings and those devices and their technology and their mythology to aliens. The ancient Egyptians, the ancient Aztec, all credit beings from other worlds. The Native Americans credit star people with their mythology. So we are not the ones who are validating it. We're just saying, what if these people were not delusional? What if it was true?
Well, it's an extraordinary series. Hey, by the way, thanks to your generosity, Ziggy Marley in his bus has been playing all the ones that you gave me, the whole series. They ride around, the entire group. The Jimi Hendrix family and the group that's singing them, they're all traveling with the same tapes. These are very important people from the standpoint of this is something they really wanted to learn about. And I think the really excellent research done by Giorgio is just really important. I've had the great privilege of viewing 2 new shows of the 5th season, The Magic of the Gods and the Satan Conspiracy episodes, and both are truly impressive for many reasons, multi-leveled meanings, and of course, so if you don't mind, when we return, because we need to take a break, I'd like to talk with Giorgio and focus on these 2 shows right away. Is that possible? Is that okay, Giorgio?
Absolutely.
I mean, because they are truly extremely important shows that I can't wait till other people see them. And I'll talk about that why in a little while. We'll be back with our guests, Giorgio Tsoukalos. I hope I got that correctly. And, of course, Tsoukalos, right? Oh, well. And he's the consulting producer. And Kevin Burns, executive producer. The new season of Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. Wait till you see some of these in the 5th series. They're extraordinary. We'll be right back.
This is Dr. Jacques Vallée. You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus, the reference in the study of the paranormal.
That's my favorite UFO researcher of all time there. Well, welcome back to 21st Century Radio. Of course, our guests are Giorgio Tsoukalos, who is the star and consulting producer of the Ancient Alien series, and Kevin Burns is the executive producer. They're both with us, and we're going to be talking about 2 shows, especially of the new season of the Ancient Aliens on History Channel. And by the way, you can check out the Ancient Aliens page at history.com or visit Kevin at PrometheusEntertainment.com and Giorgio at legendarytimes.com. Well, Giorgio, I am truly impressed by the 2 that I have seen, and for good reason. I think the research was exemplary in this area. I'm glad that you brought in so many people, but I believe the most important of these 2 is the Satan Conspiracy episodes. What was your purpose in focusing on Satan, and how can Satan be tied into the Ancient Aliens category?
Well, I mean, the idea of the show is always to ask or to question the status quo. And, there is a mainstream idea of what people think today has happened in the past. And in every sense of the word, our past is not exactly what we think it was. And so, for example, in the Satan Conspiracy, we are exploring the idea whether or not, or where did the idea of the devil even come from? Because personally, while I am a spiritual person, I am not at all a religious person at all. And so, looked at from a different perspective, we can ask ourselves, well, where did this idea of the devil originate, and has that origin held true to this day? Because according to what we know, Lucifer, for example, means the bringer of light, and he was one of the archangels of God, and then something went haywire, and there we have, all of a sudden, we have the devil and evil of the world and things like this. Now, there's no question that evil in the world exists. So if somebody would like to label that as the devil or Satan, then that is fine. There's no question about that evil exists, good exists as well. However, the story itself of the fallen angels and things like that, when looked from a different perspective, like the ancient Aslan hypothesis, one has to ask, well, what is it that happened in our past that actually led to that particular story? And according to the ancient alien theory, a long time ago, extraterrestrial space travelers visited Earth in order to jumpstart our civilization. And from there on in, that at some point, some type of a fight happened between those space travelers that arrived here, a rift happened, and this is where a mutiny occurred, where people or some of those space travelers were cast out on planet Earth, and they had to fend for themselves. And that, over the centuries and over millennia, was turned into something that it never was at the very beginning. And so those are the questions that we are exploring because, in the end, like Kevin said, we don't really know what has happened in our past anyway. So it is another way of exploring what if.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is a major important question because America has witnessed the rise of fundamentalism and its dogmatic philosophy that certainly now has been manifested in the Tea Party, which now 74% of Americans realize has a very dark, controlling side that would bring our country to its knees if the women in our government hadn't worked on that kind of compromise that we needed so badly to keep our government functioning. Fundamentalists and Tea Party types' views of Satan are wholly negative. Now, would you review for us how the dark side of Satan could be a total misunderstanding?
Well, I mean, that, unfortunately, in this country, the religious right is, they're off the deep end. And so there's not a single thing that I can say without them getting their panties in a bunch and being upset. So, like I said at the outset of my answer, there really is no question that evil exists in the world. However, the story itself of Satan or Lucifer being cast out back in the day, that, as I explained earlier, could be an idea where if the idea of space travelers in our ancient past is correct, then some type of a mutiny happened, and therefore some people were cast out from that crew. And that idea or that event over time got turned into something that it never was. Mm-hmm. Because this ties in wonderfully into the magic episode, because Arthur C. Clarke summed up the entire ancient astronaut theory perfectly when he said that any advanced technology, any sufficiently advanced technology, is indistinguishable from magic. And that is the red thread that we have to follow in the entire ancient alien theory. Because, you see, if you have a person from, let's say, 10,000 years ago, intellectually speaking, they were as intelligent as we are today. The only difference between a person from 10,000 years ago compared to today is that the technological frame was different, because technologically speaking, our ancestors were primitive. And that is even what archaeology says, that, many of the ancient monuments were built with using pulley systems and ropes and pulleys and chicken bones and toothpicks and things like that. And if somebody wants to subscribe to that, there's nothing I can do in order to change your mind. However, today, if we were to recreate some of those stupendous feats that our ancestors did, we would utilize the most gigantic of machines. We would use power tools in order to achieve or in order to replicate what our ancestors did. And if somebody wants to think that this was done with rubbing together some stones and they were all sitting there in loincloths and doing this, that's fine. But something in our past doesn't make sense. And this is where the idea of ancient aliens comes in. And that does not mean, like, for example, I personally have never suggested, not once, that aliens built the pyramids, because that is not what I think happened. According to the ancient alien theory, the pyramids were built by human beings. There's no question about that. However, they had help. They had assistance. They received instruction. And that is what the ancient texts are saying, that these gods, these beings descending from the sky, were the ones who instructed mankind to make this stuff. And in my opinion, it was a way that was their calling card, that in the future, inadvertently, one society or one generation would come upon all this stuff in the past and be like, wait a second here. We today, with all the advancements we've made in technology, we would have great difficulties replicating what our ancestors did, let's say, 5,000 years ago. I'm not saying that it cannot be done, because of course we could do it today, but we would use magnificent machinery. So our ancestors, in some way, shape, or form, received help. And that, to me, any child that is born today who grows up to be a man or a woman, we all are a product of our upbringing. And one great component of our upbringing is education. So, in order to learn a different language, you can't just, download it out of the ether. You have to receive instruction. You have to go to a tutor, or you have to take a class and things like that. So we are all a product of instruction. And so to suggest that 10,000 years ago we came up with everything out of thin air, that to me poses a great problem in logic alone. And so, the ancient alien theory steps right in what Darwin, for example, referred to as the missing link, because, we all can agree that the evolutionary record exists. There is a fossil record. Some type of evolution took place. But even Darwin himself admitted that there is something that he referred to, or that is known today as the missing link. And the missing link can be very easily explained if you factor in an outside source. And many people think it's God. Many people think it's a whole bunch of other things. But in the ancient alien opinion, it was extraterrestrials who helped us in the past. And if somebody's laughing right now and say, well, what, did those aliens that came to receive help from aliens? Yes, you can spin this game backward to the very beginning, that all civilizations at one point were seeded by other civilizations. And if you arrive at the very beginning of that creation, well, for all intents and purposes, you arrive at God. And so in the end, it's all about God anyway. So the whole ancient alien theory, you have no idea. I mean, you probably do. Of course you do. So many people are upset that, oh, you're the guy that believes in aliens and you don't believe in God and things like this. It's completely untrue. I'm a very deep believer in God. I might not believe in the God of the Bible or any of the other holy books, but at the same time, there exists this all-encompassing force of the universe, and that is a component that that is something that we all belong to, including the aliens that were here 10,000 years ago. And, so one or the other, the two ideas do not negate each other. In fact, the ancient alien theory only makes the whole creation, the whole idea of creation or the whole idea of God even more magnificent.
Well, Kevin, before we run out of time, you chose the name Prometheus as the name of your very successful company. Would you please tell us why you chose that name Prometheus? Because the kind of topics that we're talking about in the shows that I saw, both of these two shows are talking about, refer to Prometheus in a very important way.
Well, and I appreciate the question because it is an interesting answer. And the only thing I would kind of like to refine about what Giorgio just said, by the way, because Giorgio, as a contributor to the show, has his own unique point of view. I have to say, as the guy who has to put all these various points of view together, I'm less specific or less exclusionary in terms of the incorporation of a lot of other religious theory. In other words, I don't necessarily see Ancient Aliens as a contradiction of religion or even people who believe in whether it's Western religion or Eastern religion. I think there's a way to reinterpret and expand the interpretation of religion. That's, I think, what we try to do. Mm-hmm. Is I think there's a way to look at Judeo-Christianity, there's a way to look at Buddhism, there's a way to look at Hinduism, and to reconcile them within this kind of a show. Not to contradict them, but to reconcile them. Getting into the mention of Prometheus, it literally directly influenced the Satan conspiracy because it kept coming up in other episodes, the idea of the fire bringer. And I noticed a similarity between the Prometheus myth of a titan, basically a half-man, half-god, the product of a mating between a god, or as Giorgio would say, an extraterrestrial, and a human, that he stole technology from the gods and gave it to man, for which he was eternally punished. Mm-hmm. And there's a similar connection to Satan. In other words, the Satan myth, even the Satan of Paradise Lost, John Milton's Paradise Lost, this idea of a transgressing angel who gives knowledge to man, technology to man, for which he's eternally punished. The name of my company, by the way, is because my last name is Burns, B-U-R-N-S, and I wanted something that had to do with fire. And also, when I was a kid, one of my favorite books was Frankenstein.
Oh,
a lot of people don't realize the original title of the book is Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. And this idea of someone who creates something from nothing, for which they are eternally punished, since it kind of typifies my day, I figured it was a good name for my company. So the connection with Prometheus is, yes, it has to do with Burns, fire, my last name, Frankenstein, one of my favorite books, but also I think unique and appropriate to ancient astronaut theory is this idea of reinterpreting even ancient mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and reconciling that. In fact, one of the big revelations in the show, because I didn't really know this, Giorgio would know this, that one of the Dead Sea Scrolls that was found had included in it the Book of Enoch,
yes,
which is, of course, very, very important to Eric von Daniken. Well, within the Book of Enoch is the story of the Watchers. And one of the Watchers' names is, and forgive me, Giorgio, what is the name of the Watcher who, it sounds like Satan. It's like Satanas or something?
Yes.
And it's interpreted or translated variously, but the story of this Watcher is eerily similar to the traditional story of the fallen angel who transgresses against God by giving technology to man. Mm-hmm. And so what I try to do, Dr. Bob, is find these linkages. Take, for example, Giorgio's very, very profound and very, very well-held and articulate theory, but reconcile it with whether it's Judeo-Christianity, whether it's Eastern religion and philosophy, whether it's Native American folklore, and to try to incorporate it. In fact, one time, I'll confess, Giorgio, we always laugh when we remember I think the only real fight we ever had in doing the show. And Giorgio will know. And at one point, we did a show called Aliens and the Undead. And Giorgio said, "This show jumps the shark. You have gone too far, Mr. Burns. You have now put zombies in the show. You have put zombies. How do you reconcile zombies with ancient astronaut theory?" And I said, one word, Giorgio. One word. What was the word, Giorgio?
Lazarus.
Lazarus.
That's right.
I said,
yeah.
The idea of a body being brought back from the dead is in the New Testament, and so it's another way of reconciling these great mysteries. And we got miracles.
We must take a break. We must take a break now. But I wanted to just point out that the name you've chosen, Prometheus, and its links to the Lightbringer and Enlightenment, all of this is key to the evolution of our planet, because we, like, as the Statue of Liberty holds that torch up in the harbor, New York Harbor, it is about enlightenment. And unfortunately, there are some, especially in the far right, that are not interested in enlightenment. They're interested in dogma and living in a certain way. And I think that the show that you did, especially, both of the shows, especially with magic, there were so many great folks, Giorgio, that you interviewed in there. I'm so glad you got to talk about Dr. John Dee and all of that kind of thing, but we won't have time to do now. So that's why I think what you do is about enlightening people who have very little education in any of these areas, because our mass education and mass communication are too embarrassed by even talking about any of this. And it's been that way for decades and decades. And that's why I think Ancient Aliens is so important, because it's breaking down those barriers and walls to talk reasonably with facts. And I think that that's how we can really evolve and change. But, whoops, we got to take a break here. Giorgio and Kevin Burns are with us. And of course, obviously, we're talking about Ancient Aliens. And you can check out Ancient Aliens page on History.com, or visit Kevin at PrometheusEntertainment.com. Visit Giorgio at LegendaryTimes.com. Welcome back here to 21st Century Radio. Every now and then we like to award prizes. Well, I'll tell you what. The third caller tonight will win the entire third year series, 4 different CT DVDs. Third caller at 410 and 922-6680. And of course, you know what all the other numbers are. So, fourth caller, third, you're a winner. Now, we got to get back to our guests. We got we could have taken 4 hours on this, friends, because these are extremely important, in my opinion, extremely important topics. I wish we had more time to talk about the magic of gods, as I mentioned a little earlier, especially those individuals that you talked about. And most people really should know about Dr. John Dee and the work he performed, service he performed to Queen Elizabeth I, etc. Well, but I don't know if I should ask this to Giorgio or you, Kevin. But what can we expect in the rest of this season of Ancient Aliens?
Kevin, that's all you.
Well, it's us both, Giorgio, because you're going to be there right alongside. But there's 2 episodes. The ones you mentioned, Dr. Bob, are going to be airing on the History Channel. Now, what's unique about this is our show premiered on the Big History Channel, what we now call the Big History Channel. A lot of people don't realize that that History Channel, there was so many opportunities for programming, they created a second History Channel called H2. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of people who get History Channel don't get H2, but I guess 75% of the people do. And Ancient Aliens, in fact, some people were surprised when they re-premiered Ancient Aliens on what I'm calling Big History Channel. They thought it had been off the air for about a year and a half. Well, no, it had been alive and well and premiering on H2. In fact, we're We're just about finished with season 5, believe it or not, and season 6 is going to be premiering on H2 beginning on Friday, November 1st, with a show called Alien Operations, which is about long-lost surgical techniques and evidence that there were very, very sophisticated surgeries and medical practices that are from very ancient times that have been long forgotten, and we trace the origin of that. We have other episodes coming up on H2 called Emperors, Kings, and Pharaohs, where we talk about a leadership gene that may have extraterrestrial origins and might explain why we as a society kind of gravitate toward this notion of kingship. Mysterious Relics follows that. Aliens and Forbidden Islands, which is in production right now.
What a
what a
title.
On the Ark of the Covenant and the extraterrestrial connections of that. We get into aliens in North America and some, stories regarding, aliens basically in our midst and in our history, and several other topics coming up. We have 16 new shows coming up in what we're calling Season 6.
How long does it take to do a show?
I'm sorry, what?
How long does it take to put together a show?
It usually takes about 3 to 4 months for each episode, although we have several producers and writers at one time, so each season of 16 episodes takes about 6 to 8 months to produce, but each episode is usually in production for about 4 of those months.
Giorgio, of all the, I didn't know that you had just finished the 5th series and you're now moving into the 6th.
Yeah, there's more free DVDs I have to get you, Dr. Bob.
Oh, certainly, yeah, but you can't believe how. Yes, you could believe how all these various folks in rock and roll love to watch these shows. They just love it. I mean, it makes cruising across America a very fun thing to do.
Well, I mean, if somebody, if you don't mind, I mean, if somebody had said there's going to be a show on TV on any of these networks like Discovery or H2 or National Geographic about ancient civilization and comparative religion that was hugely popular, especially with young people, no one would believe it. But I think that's what we've succeeded in doing.
Yes. I think you've put us over the hurdle, a very big hurdle that for decades has kept people snickering and laughing at these kind of things when the research is really there. Before it gets too late, I needed to ask Giorgio this question. What new research exists that supports ancient astronaut theory?
Well, not a day goes by when something comes into my email inbox where, essentially this entire thing is like looking at an unfinished puzzle. However, the closer you get to the finished piece, if you finish a puzzle, you don't necessarily have to finish the puzzle to see the bigger picture. The more pieces are in place. And so, they're discovering that there are new monuments that are being uncovered or new sites that are being expanded with excavations and things like that. And I'm a very avid and close follower of what archaeologists are doing because they don't know this, but the thing is that they are doing an amazing service for the ancient astronaut theory because every time a new hominid is found, they have to go back further in the chronology of our evolution and things like that. And that stuff, all these new discoveries, they all fortify the ancient alien theory.
How far do you think you can take hominids back in the history of this planet?
Wow. Well, I mean, just yesterday I read something in the Wall Street Journal where now scientists are saying that it wasn't a great migration of a whole bunch of people that emigrated from Africa, but it was essentially just 10 people that emigrated, and they went to Russia, and from there they moved on and things like this. But the fact that every other day history has to be rewritten, that tells me that nobody really knows what they're doing. And at the same time, you know, the work that so many people have put into, it's amazing. The times that we live in are amazing. And I think that through genetics, the work of geneticists and things like this, ultimately we'll learn that, you know, something in our past happened within our own DNA. And that DNA was changed by none other than ancient aliens that made us humans, that made us who we are today.
Well, there's some theories that I'm very interested in that take the hominids all the way back several million years. That is, in the kind of bodies that we have. Actually, they take them back to even tens of millions of years.
Absolutely. Michael Cremo, for example,
Correct.
wrote a fantastic cool book called Forbidden Archaeology. And anyone who is interested in reading about, you know, that our history goes back way further than what mainstream science teaches us should definitely check out Michael Cremo's book, because all the results and all the evidence that he has listed, you know, it's not something that we pull out of thin air. We can go to the museums, you can look at the records, and there it is. All you have to do is change your mind and accept that this is what it could have been, and then you know, you're free to think whatever you want.
Well, in a little bit of time we have left, what would you like to leave us with, Kevin Burns? Kelman's called you Ken Burns. I've never heard that before, right? Kevin?
I'm dead.
What would you like to leave us with?
I say to people, I'm the one who does the shows in color.
Oh, God. Okay, all right. All right. Well, guys, I'm sorry we don't have more time, because but still, thank you for sending especially those two shows, because the quality of them and the research is something that's going to stand up for a long time, Giorgio. That's what we needed. We needed to lay a foundation, and it takes a long time to build a road. Especially towards enlightenment. And I think you've done a great job. And, you know, Kevin, without your input in this, who knows if this ever would have happened in this particular country at this time. So thank you for doing what you did.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bob, and we appreciate your support for the show, and thanks to your listeners.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you also, Giorgio, for joining us. I look forward to this for a long time. And friends, you can check out Ancient Aliens page at history.com, or visit Kevin at PrometheusEntertainment.com and Giorgio at LegendaryTimes.com.
Stimulating talk around the clock and breaking news now on Talk Radio 680 WCBM Baltimore and WCBM.com.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lisa Lucero. 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 I'm Lisa Lucero.